Dear listeners, I have so much to tell you, and I often don't know where to start. It seems the world doesn't want to admit that sometimes we make mistakes and that sometimes the wrong person gets punished for something they didn't do. Not all of us have been personally affected, but many of us have been impacted by this reality, and I feel like it's my responsibility to share these stories with you and to tell you what I've learned about wrongful convictions. Welcome back to Wrongfully Yours. Today, we continue the deeply personal and powerful conversation with Linda Gallant, the sister of Canadian exoneree Ron Dalton, a Canadian man who spent over 8 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. If you listened to our last episode, you'll remember we left off at a pivotal moment where Ron had just been released on bail, thanks in no small part to Linda's unwavering commitment, including putting up an additional $10,000 for bail to make sure her brother didn't end up in one of the country's harshest prisons. But as Linda makes clear, that moment was far from the end of the story. It was just another chapter in a long and painful journey that tested the limits of what any family should ever have to endure. Today, Linda speaks to us candidly about what came next, what it was like having Ron move into an already crowded home with 6 young children, how the family held on to hope through years of legal delays and setbacks, and how Ron's eventual exoneration still left behind deep emotional scars. She also shares moments that highlight the ripple effects of wrongful convictions on children, on mental health, on trust in the justice system, and on the strength it took to hold her family together through it all. This isn't just a conversation about injustice. It's a conversation about resilience, quiet courage, and the hidden toll that wrongful convictions take on everyone in their path. Welcome back, Linda. I am so happy for you to be able to join me again this week so that we can continue talking about your experience as you navigated through your brother's wrongful conviction. Last time I think we ended at the point where he received bail, I think is where we had left off because you had graciously said you would provide an extra $10,000 for his bail so that he wouldn't have to end up at the most horrific prison ever. And so what happened after that? Because that certainly wasn't the end of the story.
No, he came to live with us, and one of his conditions was that he had to live with my husband and I. So there was 9 of us then in the house. Um, and he
And I'm
was
sure your home was meant to have 3 adults and 6 children in it at all times.
no, it was pretty tight. We didn't have a lot of space. We had 3 sets of bunk beds then, but we knew it was going to be temporary. At that stage, we knew that he had not committed a murder. We just knew that this would be over. The trial would start. We would go through that as hard as it would be, but we knew he would be home when that was over. And of course, that didn't happen either. It took over a year for the trial, and it was December 15th, 1989, that he was convicted. My mother was in Newfoundland for the last few days of the trial because she was distraught. So we got her a ticket and said, "Mom, go over." And she went over, but she called me, and we couldn't believe that he had gotten convicted. It was out. We had pathology that told us she choked. But they had the good old boy from Newfoundland that said she didn't. And the jury believed the good old boy.
Of course.
And it's, not that simple, of course, but that's basically what it was. So then began the journey of, okay, he's going to be a couple years now for the appeal. Well, the appeal took 8.5 years.
Oh my.
And around year 5, we had put a piece on our house. And
And sorry, he's in prison
he's in
while he's
prison.
waiting the appeal?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the lawyer told me not to bother with a bail hearing because he would never get bail. So, of course, we didn't have a lot of money left. And so we believed him. So around year 5, Ronnie kept saying that this lawyer was coming from Newfoundland to see him at the Atlantic Institution, and he never showed up. He was supposed to be here in November. He never came. He's supposed to be another time. He never came. The appeal's not filed yet. My husband and I actually discussed the fact that perhaps Ronnie's appeal was already heard and it was denied, and he just didn't have the heart to tell us. And we
Oh,
were, how could it take that long, right? It just
sure.
couldn't. Um,
But
anyway,
in reality, it did take that long?
in reality, it was 8.5 years. Then along
Wow.
came Jerome Kennedy, who first thing, and when he heard about the case, got Ronnie out on bail. And
Amazing.
and I remember thinking, wow, why didn't we apply for bail? But we were told there was no way he would get out on bail. And this was
Now, in
supposedly,
all honesty, Jerome Kennedy is a bit of a magician.
yeah, like when he called me
It-
to see if we could put money up again as surety, I said to him, what is the chance? He couldn't believe that I even asked that, sort of,
oh,
because
wow.
he was so strong that he was getting this man out on bail.
So
And
this was just a complete 180 of approach to Ron's case.
yeah, for sure.
Wow. Wow.
So then, I mean, he went all over the world really to find forensic people. He had seven, I think, different forensic people that concurred with our original forensic person.
Wow.
He had emergency room attendant experts. He went over and above.
No
But
kidding.
first, he got Ronnie out on bail, and that was amazing to have him out.
And was he back in your care at this time? Like
He
when
was, yeah,
he was back under your supervision?
we were sureties, they call it, I guess. If he was to take off, and then we would lose our money. But
Right.
I never had any concern about that. But from there, then the last trial happened. Actually, there was a little trial in between. The judge got sick, and we were like, could this really be happening? And then another trial, and so then he was exonerated. And that's not the end of the story, though.
It never is.
Because even then, a lot of media coverage and things like that, but the media don't always get it right. When we got home to PEI, the night that we arrived from that trial, Allison, Ronnie's oldest daughter, well, only daughter, I guess, graduated from high school. And she had started grade 1 at our house.
Oh my gosh.
And so he was
So he
gone.
missed the whole
Missed
elementary
all
school
of
and
it.
high school of his
Missed
daughter.
every single bit of it, even the teenage years, which sometimes you might
Unbelievable.
want to miss, but um, it told the story really right then and there.
That right there, just we should all just take a second to let that sink in, that your daughter goes through all of school and you have not experienced a single moment of it for reasons that are completely wrong
Yes,
and out of your control.
yeah. When she was in grade 12 was when the final trial was happening, and I could never comprehend this. The RCMP were at the school one day and asked to speak to her because they wanted to ask her questions about that night that her mother died.
And so this is like 12, 13 years later,
Yes.
and they're asking
And
her
they're
this.
investigating. Yep. Yep. And it's like, that blew me away. The principal called me to tell me, and he said first he told them that she was under 18, and they said, no, she's 16. She has to tell us herself whether she will talk to us. And Allison, of course, we had brought the kids up right, and we knew it when that day happened, because Allison went into the room. She said, I don't want to talk to you. And she turned around and she walked out.
Wow.
But while she was walking out, they said, well, don't you remember anything about that night? And it's like, really? It
She
just,
was 3,
yeah, like five,
right? Like,
five.
oh, 5.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
Um,
but still,
yeah,
she's a
yeah,
child, like an infant,
I know.
basically, and you're expecting her to remember something.
But
Again,
those,
I think Her reaction, though, yes, you absolutely raised her brilliantly, but I think that reaction, again, speaks to these ripple effects of wrongful conviction that we don't even think of,
Exactly.
because I'm not sure that most 16-year-olds would have the
Mm.
wherewithal to say, not having this conversation and then walking out and not succumbing to the pressure,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because most 16-year-olds to this point in their life have been told, trust the
Yep.
police. You don't have anything to fear if you tell the truth. They're there to help
Exactly.
you. They're there to protect you,
Yeah.
right? So, again, just an incredible side effect
Yes.
of wrongful convictions.
And those points were stressful for me because I think that's what kept me up at night, questioning why would they have to investigate 12 years later? That's
Sure.
ridiculous. One of the other things that really bothered me after the that trial was over and he was exonerated, why did they take 30 days to say, no, we're not going to bother? Because at first they just could have appealed. And it made me angry that they didn't appeal because they were still going around saying he did it. Just because he, got found not guilty doesn't mean he didn't do it. But if that was the case, why didn't they push it then? There was so many things that it just doesn't make sense just to put everybody's lives on hold and torture them, make them miserable because you don't want to admit you made a mistake.
And that is such a common refrain, is that you don't want to admit you made a mistake.
Yeah. How much
Which is,
easier?
yeah, like sadly is a common refrain across cases of wrongful conviction. And I'm not trying to paint them all with the same brush, because every case is its own unique set of circumstances. Yet at the end, there's always this mistake, and there's almost always this complete refusal to admit
To
that a
admit it.
mistake was made.
Yeah.
And that to me just adds insult to injury.
It does. It absolutely does. And it affected our family, but it affected Brenda's family as well. As
Sure.
soon as Ronnie was convicted the first time, the RCMP brought him, which was unusual in itself, brought him to New Brunswick, dropped him off at Dorchester, whipped over to the island. Oh, and by the way, they brought autopsy pictures with them and wanted to show us. And one of my brothers was here and he said, why would we look at those? We don't want to see those. Sadly, though, the other family did see them, did look at them. And of course, an autopsy picture does not look good. And it made it that much harder. And they had them convinced that the kids should not go visit him. They told us that if we helped him, he could be charged with first-degree murder, which is not true. And, they just didn't want anybody to help him. And we were fortunate. We had an excellent psychologist that helped us out along the way. And he told us to be sure that we took the children to see him as soon as we could,
Oh, wow.
to make sure they faced where he was. And then they had to make up their own minds.
Sure.
And that's what we did. But the other family was so upset with that. Their lawyer actually even said to me, over her dead body, would those children be going to a prison? But the kids did go visit their father, and it was not a fun place to take kids, for sure.
Of course not. Of
But
course not.
then as soon as we did that, we were sued for custody of the children. And
Wow.
that was a year out of everybody's lives as well.
But you maintained custody of the children the whole time?
We did. But one of the things that bothered me the most about that and kept me awake, and I had many nights that I didn't sleep, was if we weren't fit to look after those three children, which is basically what they had to say, what would happen to our own three children?
That is an excellent question.
No,
And I'm sure one that nobody was concerned with,
no,
because
no.
the focus was on Ron's kid.
Yep. And I remember thinking, and they
Wow.
could have taken all the kids out of our house, and it's just because I didn't have a lot of faith in the system at that time.
Of course.
It just was the luck of the draw, except we had a very good judge. We had a pre-trial for that, and there was only the two parties, them and us, and the lawyers and the judge in the room, and he just looked at them and he said, I see lots about Ron in this, but I don't see anything about the children. And he
Mm,
basically told them, you can keep going, but you're not going to win. And the next day they dropped it.
wow.
Yeah. $10,000 later, though.
Well, you seem to be able to raise $10,000
I
just by
know.
saying that you
Just
can
snap
raise
my
it. So it's
fingers.
it's fine. Uh, so today, Ron has gone on to do some amazing advocacy work, and he's very much involved with Innocence Canada. How does that make you feel? How do you feel seeing your brother channel his pain and his trauma into something so powerful?
I think it's good for him. For me, it brings back the whole thing,
Sure.
although it's always there. He gets that fulfillment, I think, from
Yeah.
helping the other people. And, he didn't fit in prison. He didn't fit with the norm.
Of course.
He had a university degree and he helped a lot of people while he was in there. And I think that kept him sane. Just and probably knowing that he had it better. He did get to see his kids on a regular basis, and there was some overnight visits that the kids had with him.
Oh, wow.
um, but it's tough. It's tough to talk about. He finds it different. Like for him, he's more factual.
Yeah.
Yep. And
And it's funny, like speaking with exonerees, it's almost like they take themselves outside of themselves.
third person, yeah.
Yeah.
And lots of
Yeah.
times Ron is like that. He talks about it as if it was somebody else's story,
Yeah.
and he keeps the emotion out of it. Yeah. Not
Yeah.
always, but when he's talking to people, yeah,
Sure.
he does.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know how else you can cope with that kind of trauma or history. You know what I mean? Like, you have to separate yourself in some way, I think, to be able to recount it. And especially because exonerees are often asked to recount their past stories. I mean, they do leave a piece of themselves every time they tell their story. But if you were to be fully emotional every time, I don't think
You
you can.
couldn't. And I don't talk about it like he does, like as often as you could see last week, because I couldn't get through my speech. And I remember telling Monique on the plane on the way home how thankful I was that she was there, because some of the things she said made me feel good. When she said it was kind of normal to be talking about prison one time and going to the beach the next. Um, I was glad because then my kids were feeling that too. And for her, she said it felt normal. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
which
what we
I can
tried to
assure
do.
you is not normal,
Yeah,
but it's a testament to how well you managed raising these six kids in such like tumultuous times and uncertain times, right? Like
yeah.
you were an anchor for these children, and that's absolutely incredible.
My husband and I were. I always have
Yes,
to include him because,
yes,
without him, I would never have been able to do this for sure.
100%.
One of the things we did when Ron got out, Jerome came over to PEI for a vacation. And we had traveled once with all the six children. We drove across Canada and we went into the States, and we did not have paperwork for all the children. And of course, some of them were the same age. Anyway, we didn't get in trouble, but we realized the next time we did that, which was probably 5 years later, we went to Florida one year. We got the paperwork properly signed, so we had full custody of the children. We had put that off for so long because any day now this was going to, be over. And
Sure.
eventually we had to do it. So only one of his children was still underage when he got home, and we were able to present him when Jerome was here with the paperwork for custody of David again. Um,
Wow.
it seemed like a silly thing to do, but it felt like a big
It's
thing
so
at the time.
symbolic in so
Yeah,
many ways. Like it goes
that's the thing.
beyond just
Yeah,
the paperwork for sure.
yeah. So we were able to give him back one child, basically, and David went to live with him in Newfoundland. Although, David was 13, and that's not a great age to start bonding, but, they managed. So, and that
Amazing.
was another time where we were like, is that the right thing to do? Should we, say maybe you should stay here and, but who knows? But he wanted to go, and of course Ronnie wanted him, and off he went.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, so we're just about at time, but I just want to ask you one last thing. And, because we've talked a lot about how you don't know anything about the justice system until you've kind of been through it. So what do you wish more people understood about wrongful convictions?
I would say to be aware and ask the questions first.
Mm,
If we had known while the autopsy was happening that we should have had someone there, but we didn't know why they were doing the autopsy, right? So they were very secretive, just to ask as many questions, but then you can't believe the answers. So is that good advice or not? Letting them know that you're there. That
sure.
was another thing that the psychologist told us, that we should make sure the prison system, the correction system, knew that he has people, because people get lost in prison. And it is a different
Absolutely.
world. It's definitely a different world. So just letting them know that you're there, and you're going to ask the questions.
Amazing. This has been so great and so it's emotional, but it's enlightening and it's really interesting to hear the other side of a wrongful conviction that, the exoneree obviously goes through their trauma and, we can't forget that it ripples out and
Yeah.
that it doesn't stop just with them. Well, and this is not to take away from Brenda's family either, because they are victims in their own right. But it's just there are so many layers to um, the problems and the traumas that a wrongful conviction creates. And I cannot thank you enough for being so open and honest and candid with us and sharing your experience, because I know it can't be easy for you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And with that, we're at the end of this incredibly moving and thought provoking conversation. What Linda Gallant has shared with us over these 2 episodes is more than just a personal family story. It's a window into the devastating, long lasting, and often invisible impact of wrongful convictions. Yes, Ron Dalton spent years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit, but his children, his sister, his community, and Brenda's family were all affected by that same miscarriage of justice in profound ways. We often focus, and understandably so, on the exoneree, the person whose freedom was stolen, but Linda's story shows us the trauma doesn't stop there. It ripples outward through sleepless nights, custody battles, missed graduations, strained relationships, and years of waiting for answers that never seem to come. And yet, through it all, Linda and her husband managed to hold a family together, to give Ron's children a safe and loving home, and to stand firmly in his corner, even when the justice system continued to fail him. To Linda, I cannot thank you enough for your openness, your vulnerability, and for giving us this rare and raw glimpse into the collateral damage of wrongful convictions. And I also want to thank you, our listeners, for taking the time to engage with these stories and to reflect on what they mean. Remember, behind every statistic is a person, a family, a story, and a system we all have the responsibility to question. And while today's letter may have piqued your interest, this is only part of the story. There's still so much more to tell. The effects of wrongful convictions are far reaching. They touch us all. I'll write to you again soon as I continue my conversations with those whose lives have been impacted by a wrongful conviction. But until then, I remain wrongfully yours. If you have something that you want to talk about with me, or even if you want to just send me some words of encouragement, You can drop me a line at wrongfullyyourspodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out my website, kellylozon.ca, for more information about me and the kinds of things that I do. And so, if you were touched by this episode, please consider sharing it with others, liking and following the podcast on your favorite platform so you don't miss what comes next. And as always, thank you for listening to Wrongfully Yours, where we believe that telling these stories is the first step towards preventing the next injustice. And until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and keep fighting for justice.